Shedeur Sanders' fall was one of the biggest draft slides in history. We're going to tell you why he slid in the draft and why it's not as ridiculous as you might think. Also, the Lakers facing elimination, the Lakers down to a 3-1 series deficit. We got big takeaways why JJ Redick might have cost the Lakers this series with a big rookie mistake. Also, you got a big game winner in the NBA, Aaron Gordon, Damian Lillard. He tears his Achilles, a very sad moment for the Bucks and Damian Lillard. All that coming up next on The Big Lead. What is up and welcome to The Big Lead. My name is Doug McKain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to The Big Lead. It's the hottest, the leading stories in all of sports in less than an hour. Picked up a couple of hundred subs over the weekend, so welcome if you're new to the channel. Also getting closer to 2,000 subscribers. Once we get there, we'll be giving away a brand new number 77 Luka Doncic Lakers jersey. Hopefully the Lakers will still be in the playoffs by then. Be sure to subscribe and comment Luka Magic down below. But we have got so much to get into. A lot happened in the world of sports over the weekend, but the biggest, the hottest, the leading story in sports is the slide, the shocking slide of Shedeur Sanders. And what has been one of the biggest slides in NFL draft history saw Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback that was consistently mocked anywhere from the top 5 to the very least the bottom of the first round, slid all the way to the third day of the NFL draft. He gets picked in the 5th round as the Cleveland Browns traded their 166th and 192nd pick to the Seattle Seahawks to pick him up with the 144th overall selection. And this is something that really became national news because this is the son of Deion Sanders. This is a player that was viewed at one point as the top quarterback in this draft. But that was not the case. He ends up falling all the way to the Browns. And then to add insult to injury, you've got one of the worst pranks, one of the cruelest pranks we've ever seen, where we'll get into that in a little bit. You had a Ole Miss frat dude, it looks like, and Jeff Ulbricht's son set him up to make it seem like he was picked by the New Orleans Saints, only to find out that was a prank. But he ends up going to the Browns. I wonder what Shedeur's face looked like when he realized being selected by the Browns wasn't a prank. He ends up with a team that has Joe Flacco and drafted Dylan Gabriel. But the good thing for Shedeur Sanders is that their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, said that if you are a quarterback and you are on that roster, that you are going to have a chance to compete with that organization and to earn that starting spot. But why did he fall? Why did he fall? I talked to some scouts this weekend, and it's pretty much consensus around the league that there's a little bit more to this outside of, he's Deion's son and everything that comes with Shedeur Sanders, the brand, the legendary, the iced out watch and everything that he does on social media, that it wasn't that. The first big reason why he fell was the simple fact that there weren't that many teams that were looking for quarterbacks in this draft. And the teams that were, the Giants, the Titans, the Saints, the Steelers, the Browns, they take Sanders. By the way, I did predict that on the Friday show that he would end up with the Browns, but also the Rams. Now look at those teams. The Giants, well, they ended up with Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, and they end up going with Jackson Dart. They traded for Jackson Dart. You look at the Saints, they go with Tyler Shuck. And you look at the Steelers, they're still waiting on their quarterback situation. And the quarterback situation is different than any other situation in professional sports. You're as selective as possible. You don't just, if he was a really good cornerback or it was a really good linebacker or receiver, yes, there'd be more opportunities for him to get drafted high. But when you have a draft that doesn't have a lot of teams looking for quarterbacks, Well, you are not going to fit into those situations unless you do everything right, unless you are an elite prospect. And you look at all those teams. Giants, they went elsewhere. Saints, they went with Tyler Shucks. Steelers, we'll see what happens with them, but they didn't want to go the Shedeur Sanders route. The Browns, they pick him. Jets, they're fine with Justin Fields. And the Rams, they trade out of the first round to collect more picks to put themselves in the Arch Manning sweepstakes for next season. So this was not viewed as a high quality quarterback draft, and there just wasn't that many teams. And the second biggest reason is he's not viewed by scouts as a great pro prospect. Scouts are not media members. Mel Kiper Jr. is entertaining, great hair, NFL draft legend. He's not a scout in NFL circles that is making these teams big boards up. Mel Kiper Jr. is the same guy that went out there and ranted after the Detroit Lions took Calvin Johnson over Brady Quinn. He's the same guy that thought Jimmy Clausen was going to be the second coming of Joe Montana. So just because Mel Kiper Jr. thought that Shedeur Sanders should have been the top quarterback selected really means absolutely nothing to these teams. And you look at him as a prospect, undersized at 6'1". His athletic score was 14th. Out of the qualified quarterbacks. Of all the quarterbacks in this draft, he had a 63 athletic score. That was 14th. He had a 79 overall grade. That was the third highest. But you look at kind of where he was at as a pro prospect graded by the NFL draft scouts, he was at a 630, which your ceiling is you're eventually going to be a starter in this league, which is good. That's solid. I mean, that's on the high end for him. But there are the skeptics that say, look, a little undersized, holds on the ball too long, takes too many sacks, not explosive athletically. Yes, he does. There's some things that he does really well, right? I mean, he can definitely, he's accurate. He definitely has accuracy. Also had the shortest average depth of target of any quarterback. So he was throwing a lot of checkdowns at times, was pushing the ball at times, right? And his slide didn't necessarily justify that based on his talent level, but to think that he's this all-world talent like a Travis Hunter or like his dad, Deion Sanders. No, he wasn't that. Not very athletic, doesn't have a great arm, decision-making at times, holds onto the ball too long. So that was the second biggest reason. He just was not an elite prospect physically based on how he graded out. And then if you're not an elite prospect, well, what should you do? You should throw at the combine. You should run for scouts. So he didn't do any of that. I mean, it's really a case study how to kind of sabotage your draft stock if you're Shedeur Sanders. And the third biggest reason why, and I think this is truly the reason why he didn't get drafted in the first 3 rounds, and that is he absolutely bombed his interviews. He was completely unprepared in his interviews. And this is from multiple NFL scouts, multiple NFL insiders said that he was not prepared when coaches asked him in interviews about installs, about what they would do in certain situations, about using the whiteboard to draw up plays, that he was uninterested, that he was downright just aloof at times. And Matthew Berry, he wrote in his insider column, he said, I got the exact opposite read on Shedeur Sanders that I got from Cam Ward. Said, I want to be careful here, but I spoke with 2 people on 2 different teams that met with Sanders and completely independently of each other, and they had the exact same thing to say. They both said it was a bad meeting and that he came off as unprofessional and disinterested. Both also said that after the meeting, they had a lesser opinion of him than prior. These same people both met with Cam Ward as well, and both said they loved Ward and it was a great meeting. So if you are Shedeur Sanders and you want to get picked by the Giants and you know you're going to be interviewed by Brian Daboll and you come to that meeting and you're not prepared to talk about installs, you have yourself to blame. You absolutely have yourself to blame, because what's the flip side? How about Jalen Milroe? Jalen Milroe, quarterback out of Alabama, ends up going to the Seahawks, gets drafted higher than he did. Well, Jalen Milroe, here was what they had to say about his answers. Says his answers were tremendous. His knowledge was extremely impressive. One of the teams asked Jalen Milroe a series of questions about what he was really good at. And then they said, hey, what could you get better at? And what was Jalen Milroe's answer? He said, how much time do you have? General managers eat that up. So Jalen Milroe crushed his interview. Cam Ward crushed his interview. Shedeur Sanders showed up like it was the Step Brothers interview, and he farted. And he was doing the Pam bit with these teams. Shedeur Sanders, if he wanted to get drafted higher, he should have rolled up to that interview, not like it was the scene out of Step Brothers. He should have rolled up like he was Christopher Gardner, Will Smith's character in The Pursuit of Happiness, doing everything he could to get that job. One of my favorite movies, one of my favorite scenes. When he asked Will Smith, hey, what would you say if a guy walked in for an interview without a shirt and I hired him? What would you say? Will Smith said, well, hey, you must have had on some really nice pants. Shedeur Sanders absolutely bombed, was unprepared. I don't think Deion did a good job. Here's the fourth reason. Deion's his agent. When your agent is your dad and he's not being completely truthful about how teams feel about you, you're going to set yourself up for failure. You're going to set yourself up for disappointment because Deion, of course, is Deion, right? I mean, he didn't have to prepare. He was so athletic. He was so great at what he did. Shedeur's not like that, right? And how is this proven? Well, Shiloh Sanders, he ended up hiring an agent. So Deion being his agent, I don't think helped. Him not being a great elite prospect didn't help. Him bombing the interviews didn't help. Teams not across the league needed quarterback didn't help. And then at the end of the day, I think the icing on the cake for him was just the whole kind of legendary persona. And I will say that now he can truly be legendary. Because if you get drafted in the first round and you're a top 5 pick and you make the Pro Bowl and you win a Super Bowl, yeah, you're really good and you're to a degree legendary, but now you really have an opportunity to be legendary because now you're a 5th round pick, you're on the Browns, and if you can win a Super Bowl as a 5th round pick for the Browns, then you can really be legendary. So he should welcome this opportunity, but this is a case study. Players in the future, don't bomb those interviews. You're a quarterback. They don't have to draft you. You have to impress teams. I don't care what name's on your back, because if his name was Shedeur Simmons with the same stats, the same numbers, no one would be going crazy right now that he got drafted where he did. That's just the truth of the story here. People think that there's something deeper with this. There's really not. The truth is, bombed the interview, was a great prospect, and he is where he is. I'm rooting for him now, though. I will say, I'm rooting for him now because did you see this cruel prank? This cruel prank that was done on Shedeur. He's got his whole family there waiting for this call, agonizing to get picked. And you got 2 college kids that got his number and they prank him thinking that he got selected when he didn't.
Hey, is this Shedeur? Hey, this is Mickey Loomis here, the GM of the New Orleans Saints. How you doing? This is Mickey Loomis here, GM of the Saints.
How you doing?
Good, how are you, man?
Good, been waiting on you.
Yeah, we have. It's been a long wait, man. We're going to take you with our next pick right here, man.
This ain't gonna be legendary.
Hey, but you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, man. Sorry about that.
What does that mean?
What? What'd he say?
I don't know.
How you gonna ask us what it mean and you was on the phone?
You heard that?
You said you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer.
Sorry about that.
Why did he call?
What the fuck?
Hey, that's fucked
I don't know what that was. It's 50-50. But nobody got this number though.
It was private.
Did they just troll, bro?
It can't.
Man, he just got trolled, bro. They tripping now, fam. Now I'm gonna crash out, bro.
Yeah, that was one of the cruelest pranks. You got a guy that everyone in the world is talking about, the fact that he hadn't been drafted yet, and these 2 dudes who have a cooler as a table are making national news, international news, really, by pranking Shedeur Sanders, making him feel like he had gotten picked when he did not. And it turns out that this was Jax Ulbrich, who's the son of Falcons defensive coordinator Mike Ulbrich, I think, right? And he said on his Instagram. He goes, on Friday night, I made a tremendous mistake. Shedeur, what I did was completely inexcusable, embarrassing, and shameful. I'm so sorry I took away from your moment. It was selfish and childish. I could never imagine getting ready to celebrate one of the greatest moments of your life, and I made a terrible mistake and messed with that moment. Thank you for accepting my call earlier today. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. And that was on Jax Ulbricht's Instagram. And then the Atlanta Falcons, they came out and they issued an official apology. They released a statement that said earlier in the week, Jax Ulbricht, it's Jeff Ulbricht, the 21-year-old son of defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbricht, he used to be the defensive coordinator at UCLA, unintentionally came across the draft contact phone number for Shedeur Sanders off an open iPad while visiting his parents' home and wrote the number down to later conduct a prank call. Jeff Ulbricht was unaware of the data exposure or any facets of the prank and was made aware of the above only after the fact. The Atlanta Falcons do not condone this behavior and send out sincere apologies to Shedeur Sanders and his family, who we have been in contact with to apologize to, as well as to facilitate an apology directly from Jax to the Sanders family. So this is just absolutely inappropriate, unnecessary, cruel, vicious. I mean, they didn't do anything illegal, right? They didn't do anything illegal. I think two things can be true. This is terrible, but also a pretty well executed prank by these knuckleheads. But you got to feel for Shedeur. You really do. I mean, this is his origin story now. And if he doesn't go on to have a really good career, I mean, kind of the thing we'll talk about most from him is this draft weekend fiasco, but those guys should be ashamed of themselves, man. I know people are saying, oh, why didn't they open up an investigation for Cooper DeJean when he got pranked? Because it's totally different. Shedeur Sanders is a higher profile name, and he was sinking later in the draft. These guys, I mean, they should be absolutely in shame. Obviously, you can't press charges or anything like that. But I mean, I really think that these guys should absolutely be embarrassed beyond belief. But J-Rob, what do you just make of that prank situation there? That is some cruel stuff.
Yeah, I thought the prank was cruel. Honestly, can you ground your kid when they in college? Can you still get grounded?
I mean, right?
Yeah, like
for that cooler table alone.
Yeah,
man.
the cooler table. I'm grounded. Jax, you're grounded for a minute. I'm cutting the card off. Like, you might as well work at the Ole Miss team store.
You can't bring your laundry home.
Yeah, like you're cooked for a little bit. Yeah, like just because I'll be more embarrassed from the standpoint of DMAC. They had the organization put out a statement. Like, you have my job. Like, my job had to put out a statement on behalf of my kid. And so I'm embarrassed for Jeff Ulbricht, and then obviously his son. I mean, listen, man, you might not be having a great summer break. You know, you might be working with dad. You might be interning with the Falcons, picking up towels. You might be a water boy for the summer, because there's just no way, like, I could just let this slide. And you got to discipline something like this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing too is, like, the kid was in that video.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's all other fumble in the situation. Like, how are you going to actually be in the video? I mean, if I was going to be, all right, here's the number, I'm freaking like moving to Mexico for like a month. But to be in the video like that was absolutely just incredible that I would even do that. But yeah, I mean, why does everybody record everything, by the way? It's kind of like another example of that. But yeah, I mean, you could say, I mean, that prank was legendary, but also it was extremely cruel.
Yeah.
And look, honestly, man, hey, for me, if I'm Shedeur Sanders, I'm getting as petty as possible.
Yeah.
An eye for an eye. Let's start some prank wars. Let's start some prank wars. I don't know what could top that. Like, I don't know if this guy is looking to get hired somewhere and you pretend to be the CEO of that company, say we're hiring you, and be like, no, we're not. Like, I don't know, like, what he could do.
The worst thing he could do is DM his girl.
DM his girl, hey.
DM his girl.
Okay, hey, I mean, yeah, he's like, you pranked me because I slid. Now I'm gonna slide
in your girl's DMs.
Yeah, I mean, he could do something like that. That would be legendary too. Have that Rolls Royce pull up. But I'm just saying, like, you gotta, like, within his rights. I mean, you gotta do something back. You gotta do something back. I don't care what it is. Like, get full blown petty. You know, when they go low, we go to the flow.
To the flow.
You know what I mean? Like, he really has to do something. But honestly, these guys should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. But what do you make of just the whole slide? I know I said what I said, and for me, it's like I do think that falling where he did, it like Jalen Milroe should be like, damn, I fell that long. You You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there were some people that thought Jalen Milroe could have been picked in the first round, or maybe he gets picked towards the top of the second round. So it's a position where teams are extremely selective, and you gotta nail every single aspect of it, from the interviews to the combine. And unfortunately, I think Shedeur had a different sense of how teams felt about him. And that's just kind of why he slid where he did. And then you add everything else, and then that's where you end up at the 5th round with the Browns.
Yeah, I think you and I both were a bit at a crossroads with Shedeur and our opinions of him. Do I think he was a 5th round selection? I'm gonna be honest, absolutely not. I thought he was a day 1, day 2 pick. I'm gonna stand on that point. I think there's 2 things that I could attribute that really affected him in the draft. I think one, I hate that his dad was his agent. I think D-Mac, you know this. Like, sometimes your agent is the guy who's telling you what's coming out of these front offices, but they're not going to tell you too much because they hear the harsh realities, the harsh truths. And so you need somebody who's going to be able to relay those messages, speak on your behalf, kind of say some of the negotiable things that you're not able to say. I definitely think he should have had an agent. The other part of this, and to me, D-Mac, this is the reason why he slid, was not because of his game. At the end of the day, he was a very productive quarterback in the NFL, regardless of how you feel about his physical capabilities, the ability to stand in the pocket, scan the field, and make decisions. He was as good as anybody in the country. I do feel like, though, when you go into a job interview, I hate to say this, but we all kind of, tame ourselves for the interview. You're selling yourself. And I feel like for Shedeur and the Sanders family, they're so unapologetic. They're not turning down who they are for anybody. And I think Shedeur went on the podium and said, if you care about changing your franchise, you're going to pick me because I've changed 2 franchises around. So I do think for a lot of people that rubbed them the wrong way, obviously what happened with the Giants interview and Brian Daboll, that didn't go over well. And so I do feel like this was one of those situations where the NFL was like, you're not bigger than the program. And it was a lesson in maybe humility. Do I agree with it? Probably not, because I've seen way worse red flags from other guys. I mean, Johnny Manziel was doing cocaine before big games in his career, and he still went first round. And obviously, Johnny Manziel won a Heisman. I can concede that. But ultimately, I think you hit it on the nose, man. This is just a part of the story. If you're that first round talent, second day talent you still are, you should beat out majority of those guys in that quarterback room. And this is just a part of the journey. This is a part of the Shedeur Sanders lore. And you got to, at this point, just kind of take it and run with it. But I don't think he should have slid. Mel Kiper might have been the most upset about the slide.
No, and the reason why Mel Kiper was upset is because he got exposed for not being as plugged in as he wants people to believe.
Yeah.
And I think that I always cringe when I hear the same thing repeated by 15,000 people, and it's, 32 teams passed on Shedeur Sanders. No, 4 teams. 5 teams passed on Shedeur Sanders, and I'm not here hating, saying that he's terrible or he's bad or anything like that. Had he gotten picked where Tyler Shook got picked up, okay, cool. Fine.
Right.
If the Giants trade up for him instead of Jackson Dart, I mean, okay, cool. Right. Outside of Cam Ward, that was a hodgepodge of quarterbacks that all could have been picked interchangeably.
Yeah.
But if the reason why he fell like he did, I'm like, okay, fine, because those guys like Dart, they like Shuck, they like Milroe better. All those 4 guys are really, really close compared to the gap between those guys versus the gap between them and Cam Ward is significant. So that's why I'm not totally shocked. And then you add all the other stuff, Deion being his agent. I think, look, you're Deion Sanders, bro. Like, you're trying to run a college program.
Yeah.
You don't need to be doing all the nitty gritty, dirty work that an agent has to do. I will say, though, Deion, he said that he was going to be picked in the top 5. He was the top 5 rounds, though, not picks. I think that kind of where he was. But like I said, I'm rooting for the kid. Same. I think, like I said, legendary. Look, like I said, kind of a couple minutes ago, it's legendary to be drafted and be a good NFL quarterback for sure. But like, that word gets thrown around too lightly these days.
Yeah.
If he wins a Super Bowl with the Browns, if he wins a starting job, if he's a Pro Bowler, if he leads that team to the playoff,
he wins a playoff game as a Brown.
He wins a playoff game, right? I mean, that's legendary in all caps, bold lettering.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, you just feel for the. And here's a clip of the Browns organization. Here's a pic of the Browns organization after they make the pick, and yeah, clearly this is a boardroom that was kind of divided on the pick.
Is it reality in regards to Shedeur and Deion? Deion's not going to interfere. He's not going to be calling the coach. He's not going to be commenting about Shedeur while he's in Colorado. Lou, I think there's a lot of just fake news out there surrounding the
Yeah, it's like we had a talent show and a kid singing and he's bombing and you just kind of clap anyway because you feel bad, you know, that kind of thing. And look, here's another meme. We saw this. This is from NFL News. Awful. Shedeur Sanders tries drowning himself immediately after finding out that he's been drafted by the Cleveland Browns. So yeah, I mean, it's the Browns, man. And you got Dylan Gabriel that was picked at. So Dylan Gabriel picked ahead of him is egregious. That's the one is the head scratcher. It's unacceptable.
That was the one where everybody was like, all right, this is getting ridiculous. And the sad part is, like, Dylan's just not a better prospect than Shedeur, and Dylan's also 5'10". You know, like, and we're talking about undersized here. I mean,
get a suit, get a watch, put on some cologne, go to the interview the right way. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
I will say this. Shedeur Sanders, he tweeted out, "Thank you, God." And my favorite response to that was KFC. KFC responded and they said, the colonial was rejected 1,009 times before finally landing our famous original recipe. Sometimes all a Sanders needs is a little time to cook. Congrats, Shedeur. So rooting for him. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's with the Browns. Odds against